Your book argues that Putin has manipulated some foundation myths to make it seem that invading Ukraine restores an historic unity between Ukraine and Russia, that the Russian concept of political leadership differs from the Western European in that historically in Russia the leader and the state are pretty much indistinguishable. And you also tell us that Joseph Stalin, who imposed a terror and a famine that killed millions of Russians, is well regarded in Russia today. Are these considerations relevant to understanding Russia now?
Oh, yes, I think so. I mean, Putin has put forward a number of ideas about what it is to be Russian. He has, to some extent, become the focus of Russians' national identity, which, you know, under the Soviet Union was to some extent subsumed within an all-union imperial identity in which perhaps they were the superior brothers in a family of nations, but in which they were not really allowed to express their Russianness as such, because it was meant to be a Soviet system. So since his presidency, I think Putin has built up the idea of what Russia means, and it means that to be a sovereign country, in his imagination, all of Russian history must be reclaimed as a source of pride, including, as you say, Stalin. But, you know, what does Stalin mean to most Russians? He means, yes, they weren't taught that, you know, he was necessarily this mass murderer we know him to have been in the West. They were taught that he was the man who made Russia great, the Soviet Union great, that he had industrialized the country, he'd created a sort of sense of security, he'd given Russians a sense of what they were attempting to do in the world. So, you know, he gave them a goal, he gave them a sense of destination. And that's what perhaps, you know, is at the core of Putin's appeal to the Russians, to give them this sense of their mission in the world. And it is, as you say, it is really an imperial identity in which Russia's role in the world replaces that of the Soviet Union, and Ukrainians are inferior or junior brothers in this way of looking at the world.
And do you have any sense that because the war is not going as Putin intended, and with conscription, with the demonstrations we've seen, do you have any sense that there's any change going on in Russia today?
Well, I think you're right that mobilization is an incredibly risky operation, because Russians may be happy to tell pollsters that they generally support the war, as they have done. I mean, 75% according to most opinion polls. But it's another thing to go beyond voicing support and actually going to fight. And at that point, as we've already been seeing, there's likely to be a breakdown of order in the units sent to the front, and indeed possible mutinies at some point if it goes as badly as it looks as if it is likely to, because of logistical problems, lack of ammunition, lack of arms, lack of clear command structures. So, you know, the cohesion of Russians themselves is likely to be tested at a societal level, just as the cohesion of those units is likely to be. And so I think we may well see the mobilization actually accelerate the process of social breakdown and questioning of the political leadership.